Sorry, Chair, can I suggest that we test the voting as well after the last shambles we had? Please.
Well, it has been tested.
I think the members should test it as well, I think.
Well, if you so wish, Councillor, yes. What's our total here today?
Well, there's a couple more that are just... Let's count first.
How many more? 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, yeah? Would you like to press your plus or minus button? Sorry.
Clear the board and
clear the board first.
Yeah.
Could you press plus or minus now, please? $22.
We counted 23.
23.
23 voting members in the chamber.
Councillor Arrow Roberts has gone out.
Okay.
Okay.
So Arwell...
Arrow Roberts has made it 23. Right.
He didn't want to do the vote? Or?
No, his phone went off.
Okay.
Yeah.
All happy? Right. We'll go to the agenda item now. Item number 1, apologies for absence, please. I've had one this morning from Councillor Peter Evans. Stewart. Barry Mellor. Any more apologies? Item agenda number 2, declarations of interest. I will ask the legal officer to come in a minute after I welcomed you all officially to the Planning Committee meeting, which is held today on the 18th of February 2015. The meeting has been webcast with the exception of any business, and the Council resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. Mrs. Cordiner, please.
Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now, or as soon as the Council affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it is a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available from the committee support staff here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any? Councillor Mervyn Parry.
I'm going to declare an interest on the Pentramer planning, Chair.
Councillor Paul Penlington.
I'm not sure if it's a personal interest, but it may be. I'm a member of the Town Council President as well, which the Council chairs as part of the Team Out Development.
You just sign a form noting you're a member of the Town Council.
Okay. And Councillor Podmary, yes? From Holiday Williams.
Personal interest in the Pentramer on the King, please.
Urgent matters as agreed by the Chair. I have not received any. Officers, nothing? Thank you. Certainly.
Thank you, Chair. Some months ago we gave permission to Scarborough Development with conditions attached to it, in that there would be some movement on the site, greening and enhancement to the site, promenade side. This hasn't happened, and I wonder, will we be taking enforcement out against the developers, Scarborough Development there, or will it be coming back to this authority so that we can look at the progress or non-progress taken on that site? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Officers?
If I come in briefly, Chair, for me, I think there's a number of issues. What we would do if members are happy with that is to send an update round to Real Mag in the next 24 hours to update all the Real members of where we're up to. And if Real Mag then request a report to come back to Planning Committee in the future, then we can do that. But it's probably not now is the time to go into a detailed debate on that particular issue. But we're more than happy to update members, particularly from Real, given the Real issues, in any way that they would like. So I suggest an email update in the next 24 hours from officers.
Thank you, Chair, for that, and thank the officer, if I may, for the involvement. But our MAGS meeting is this evening, and it would be really advantageous to the Real members if we did get an email today rather than in 24 hours. The meeting will have been and gone.
I understand. We'll do an update in 4 hours.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, minutes, is to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 21st of January 2015. I shall go through them page by page. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. 16. 17. 18, 19, and page 20. Someone move that they are correct, please. Diolch yn fawr, seconded, diolch yn fawr. Councillor Hugh page.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just make the same point that I made at Council recently, is that even though the minutes are detailed and there's information in there, but it doesn't attribute it to any member who spoke on certain topics. And I think we invest time in coming to these meetings and represent the people that have asked us to be here. Therefore, I think we should have credit for what we've said. It's all well and good that it may be on telly, whatever, but it needs to be minuted, please, the same as the Council.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd. Item agenda number 5, applications for permission for development. Could I ask Mr Mead, please, to give a brief introduction of the relevant items on today's agenda?
Diolch, Chair. Thank you very much. Bore da, members of the public, good morning to everybody. Just to check that everyone has got the relevant sheets in front of them this morning. The most important sheet for everyone is the blue sheet. If people have got the blue sheet, that will tell them the running order of the items on the agenda today. Items that contain public speaking are brought forward to the start of the meeting, so the running order is in the boxes there for you on the blue sheet, and with additional late information contained therein. We will stop and pause at each item that's got information on the blue sheet to enable members and members of the public to keep up to date with the information on there. We also have a yellow sheet as well, which is pertaining to a particular item on the agenda. We will talk you through that as well when we get to that particular item. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Mead. For the first application, which is the cycle track, I will ask the Vice Chair if you'll come up and take this application, please. And the reason is that I'm the ward member and I've been involved from the word go on this application. So I feel happier if the Vice Chair will take the meeting.
Chair, Raymond, do you want those? No, I'll take that. Okay, you don't need that report. No.
Good morning. Agenda item 5, please, which is St David's Church, St David's Lane and Brookhouse Road, Denby. Construction of a multi-user active travel ute. Agenda item 01/2014/0705/PF. We have 2 speakers in relation to this item, and I'm going to ask Mr. Kevin Ringer to come along first, please. Good morning, Mr. Ringer. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. I am one of the... As residents, we fear an increase in crime and antisocial behaviour. We cite evidence from the nearest similar route at Prestatyn, where it has been necessary to install CCTV, street lighting and alcohol bans. But would this happen in Denby? It already has. CCTV and youth dispersal orders already exist in Lower Park. As residents, we have regularly been disturbed by antisocial behaviour, which also occurs at Ystrad. Numerous complaints have been made to the council and police. With antisocial behaviour occurring near both ends of the route, there is no doubt it will become a rat run, disturbing residents and vulnerable route users. We residents have a right to the peaceful enjoyment of our homes. We object to the visual impact of the route. By my home, it'll be 10 metres wide, fence to fence. The vast majority of the route is green barrier in the LDP. The applicant held a public consultation. The route is not one of the routes consulted on. The plans state Townsend to Pentre Llanrhaeadr, but it goes to neither. It must be considered on its own merits and not part of a wider scheme. It can go no further. The route does not link communities or other cycle routes and duplicates existing footpaths. It goes from nowhere to nowhere, leaving users on Brookhouse Road. The applicant has admitted to me in writing that the council have received complaints about the safety of Brookhouse Road, the very place where the route will deposit users. It is even more dangerous at Cow Lane, where the only legal access is a blind corner from Park Street, another fast yet narrow road. The road crossings and junctions at St David's Lane and Ystrad Road are all on blind corners or sharp bends or near the brow of a hill. Even the plans admit that visibility is inadequate. This route is supposed to be fit for unaccompanied children. The safety audit does not certify the route is safe. Route users are unsegregated, so cyclists share the same track with wheelchairs and dogs. One section is less than a third of the width of government recommendations, and is one of several sections also shared with road vehicles. Madness. No wonder Denby Town Council has voted against this route 3 times, most recently 7-1 against. To use Denby Town Council's words, it is an accident waiting to happen. We strongly object to the route going through Denby Town Cemetery, requiring the construction of an access ramp which will be a mere 2 foot from the nearest grave. This is a place where people go for peace and quiet and to reflect on their loved ones who have passed away. Please give the cemetery visitors some respect and leave it alone. This route is not wanted by Denby residents in general. Letters of objection from Denby residents significantly outnumber those in support. We support cycling, but not this insensitive, dangerous, nowhere-to-nowhere route that is not wanted by Denby residents or Town Council, costs £500,000 of public money. We implore you to reject it. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Mr. Ringer. We have our second speaker, Mr. Clwyd Wyn, please. Good morning, Mr. Wyn. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. When I was young, we were able to cycle in the roads by our houses, and even up to the Denby Moors when I was 9 and 10 years of age. But now there is no road safe enough for children, or adults for that matter, to cycle. Roads are dominated by cars, lorries and buses. Parents and grandparents have to resort to using car parks on a Sunday and the old Quicks area to take children to cycle. The proposed path is multi-use and aimed at walkers, runners, wheelchair users, pushchairs, as well as cyclists. It will also be for all age groups, from children to the elderly. There is little opportunity for the more vulnerable to be able to experience activity and exercise in open countryside, traffic and relatively pollution-free. The only traffic-free footpath in Denby available to the less able and wheelchair users and pushchairs, not cycles, is Mount Wood, which has its limitations, but we at Denby Community Conservation Volunteers are proud to have helped to create this, despite a small number of local objectors, as it is so popular with all different types of users. It is unfair that Denby is the only town in Denbighshire that does not have this type of amenity. The people of Denby deserve the same amenities as the other towns in North Wales. There is in fact a duty on local authorities to provide such under the Active Travel Act. We should also be providing opportunities for exercise to counteract the obesity epidemic and improve well-being. It is known that people who start being active as children tend to carry on into adulthood. It needs to be accessible to all Denby people, and especially Upper Denby, which has been an Objective 1 area for several years, so access from St David's would be convenient for them. The initial consultation, in which there were over 700 responses, 80% of those who responded wanted a traffic-free route, which is known to have a higher usage. The point about it passing close to the cemetery and encouraging antisocial behaviour is, I think, quite offensive, implying that Denby people are not able to behave in an appropriate manner. There is a minority in every community who behaves in this way, but I don't know of any evidence that these paths encourage antisocial behaviour. I believe that there is a path adjacent to Rhuthun Cemetery that has not experienced any antisocial behaviour, and there are paths through other cemeteries in the UK. I hope we will eventually have a path from the North Wales coast through to Rhuthun and maybe as far as Corwin and Llangollen, but this section is needed first because the path bypassing the town would be of little value to those living at the top of town. A good and caring community is measured by its treatment of the most vulnerable. By providing inclusive facilities in which they can participate in similar activities to so-called able-bodied people, we are showing that we are concerned for the health and well-being of all our residents. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Wynne. You will notice there's quite a bit of information, members, on the blue sheet, so I'll give you a few moments to go through that before bringing the officers in. Thank you, members. We've got two local members, Councillor Ray Bartley and Councillor Richard Davis. I'm going to ask Councillor Bartley to come in first, please. Oh, I beg your pardon. Can we go to the officers first? Would you mind? Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, because we've got another officer here as well I wanted to introduce to you before we went into the debate, and also just to clarify as well that there is an additional Denby member relative to this particular scheme, which is Councillor Gwyneth Kensler there. Apologies that her name was not put on the blue sheet in relation to that particular item We have already grovelled and apologised, Councillor Kensler. I don't know whether it's been accepted yet. Just a couple of matters. Obviously, we pointed out to you before that the yellow sheet, and it does pertain to this particular item that you've got, it does give a bit more information in relation to the proposed route, this active travel route, and goes into a bit more detail on the plan. It's probably opportune for me to now mention my colleague to the right here, who's Mike Jones from our Highways section. He's here today to answer any technical questions that members may have around the issues pertaining to this route, specifically obviously in relation to highway safety matters. I think it's just also important to point out and just to clarify for members before we go into the debate as well, that the local planning authority obviously are duty bound to deal with planning applications that are submitted. We're duty bound to consult on the information that's supplied with those planning applications, and we have consulted on the proposed route as submitted as part of this planning application. There was pre-application consultation with the community on this. And obviously departments of the council and developers do have the right to go and consult with the community before they put an application in. But I just wanted to clarify that when the application came in, it is this route that we have consulted on through the planning process. And it's the material planning considerations that you will be determining as part of your debate today. Thank you, Chair.
Does Mike want to come in now? You're going to hang on for your question. You're going to hang on for your question. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, regarding what Paul has just said now, that the route which was put out for consultation in March 2013 is little resemblance to what was voted for by the public. The route was changed following objection by the Ddinbych High School to the present application. But the residents of the areas St David's Lane, Park Street and neighbouring areas were not consulted on the new proposed routes by the Highways Department. There are material planning issues and non-material planning issues in this application, which I feel that they go hand in glove at times, and it's very difficult to separate them. However, I fully support, incidentally, a cycle path and everything that goes with improving one's health, and so does a majority of people in the gallery here today. But what we are against is the proposed new route. The name of the function has changed many times. Firstly, it was the Vale of Clwyth cycle path from Rhyl to Rhuthun. But now it has been called the multi-user active travel route, which is approximately 3/4 of a mile long. But I call it the road from nowhere to nowhere. The ownership of the land on this route is a big issue. Let us start at the approach roads to the start of the proposed route. That is all roads with highway concerns from Park Street, Peak Lane, Cow Lane, St David's Lane. All the areas are narrow with cars parked on them all. Safety issues and highway issues is a big concern here. The entrance from St David's Lane to St David's House is partly owned by Mr and Mrs Roberts, who live at St David's House, and they have not given permission for it to be used. The other half of the entrance is common land. On Mrs Roberts' side of the house, there are 4 trees, and these trees have TPOs on them, tree preservation orders. But I haven't seen anywhere that if this route does go ahead, then those trees will have to be, the road will go past these trees, and there's no guarantee that the roots of these trees will not be damaged. We go along the path then towards Goblin Farm, an Ystad Road. This major road here is used by lorries, tractors, heavy goods vehicles, bends, hump bridge, and everything. And this, again, is a major safety hazard. Then we go along the periphery of the cemetery. As Mr Ringer has mentioned, is it right that this form of activity should go along the perimeter of the cemetery? The fencing is a corridor of steel. It's narrow, and the whole fencing is another issue. Then you go to Wins Park. past the back of Middleton Park and Crydyr Castell, and you come out to a dead end. If the cyclists want to go back onto the A525, they've got to go through the Brookhouse, little hamlets of Brookhouse, which is very narrow, very bendy, very dangerous, and that again is another issue. But the land, at this moment in time, again, there's probably not a material issue, but the land further on than the Waynes Park is privately owned by 3 people, and they are adamant that they will not sell. I feel that this whole proposal should go back to the drawing board and rethink, and they should go along the 82525 along the Denby bypass. Many people walk along the Denby bypass now, and they're always asking for a path to go along the bypass. Madam Chair, if I can come back at the end, I will be proposing a refusal on this application with reasons.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul Penlington, please. Oh, I beg your pardon. I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry. I realised that, but I didn't see your hand up. Councillor Richard Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Speak.
First of all, I'd like to thank the officers, Paul Mead, Paul Griffin, Mike Parker and Mike Jones, along with councillors Arrow Roberts, Mervyn Parry, Gwyneth Kensler, Ray Bartley and Town Councillor Margaret Bowe for their company in last week's site visit, where many of my concerns were answered. My first question was, is the planning application for a single cycle track to get from A to B as quick as possible? Or is it a cycle and leisure track so that families, cyclists, walkers, wheelchair users and anyone else can stroll along at a leisurely pace? Do we need a cycle track in Denby? Of course we do. We are probably the only area or town anywhere in Denbighshire that has not got a cycle or leisure track. I have spoken to many residents living at both ends of Lower Park, not just the Brookhouse end, and Upper Denby, and many are in total support of such a project, as well as the objectors. The objectors are predominantly and understandably residents from Crydyr Castell, Marcellus Court, Hillary Close at one end, and residents of St David's Lane at the other end. The proposed route is from the junction of St David's Lane, running off Cow Lane to Brookhouse Road, encircling the recreation high school fields, crossing Ussard Road along the edge of the cemetery, joining the Maintainers Road at the rear of the cemetery, out along the edge of the old railway line to Brookhouse Road. Quite a mouthful there. It was made clear that where anything outside of these boundaries, where the application is, outside of the was not in the planning application. Anywhere outside is not in the planning application. Land ownership is a civil matter, and it would be up to the developers to challenge. The pathway from St David's Lane to the high school fields, for as long as I can remember, has been a public right-of-way. And by the way, I'm 60 plus. Even though there is some controversy to the ownership at the entrance of the new pathway. If we were to start at St David's Lane, next to the church, there is already, and has been for many years, a tarmac footpath leading down to Goblin Farm fields. We were informed that this initial pathway to the fields doesn't actually need planning permission, as an upgrading of the path was possible without planning permission. However, there is some dispute over part of the land next to the old rectory at the entrance to the pathway. The new proposed route would allow Central and Upper Denby residents a length of pathway from the St David's Lane to the cemetery and onto Brookhouse, without having to use the main roads. The crossing of Ussard Road is a major concern. These exits and crossings have been areas of grave concern and safety issues from Town Council as well as ourselves. As you can see from the papers, that an independent highway safety audit have been submitted and their recommendations have been addressed by Highways so as to alleviate the safety concerns. Safety is paramount. Therefore, it is pleasing to see that the audit was done externally, which included, obviously, visibility and safety at all proposed junctions. The next stretch of the route is the most controversial part, causing great concerns to the residents of Cryd y Castell, Hilledy Close and Marcellus Court. Some of the houses or part of Cryd y Castell are separated from the fence of the cemetery by a small strip of DCC land. This part of Cryd y Castell have endured a fence of sorts for many years, so the visual impact should be roughly the same for them. The last section of the route leaves the cemetery and then proceeds along the edge of the show field and the land owned by DCC, the old railway line. The majority of the objections, understandably, are from the three named Cryd y Castell, Hilledy Close and Marcellus Court. One objection was received from our AM Alan Jones. Having done a small survey myself across much of Lower Denby and Upper Denby areas, by asking a few simple questions, it soon became apparent that the further away from the said areas, the less objections, which is quite understandable. Throughout the process, I have only received personally 7 household objections either verbally or written on one end of the project, and a further 6 objections from the other end. I actually had 3 households of Cryd y Castell support the project with conditions, just like the applicants. Many residents of Denby have stated that it would be great to have a traffic-free area to walk with their children or grandchildren. There is an objection for the fear of an increase in crime and antisocial behaviour, which was likened to Prestatyn. I ask, where is the evidence to support this statement? Much of the area is open land, which has easy access to the gardens of the residents as of now. Wouldn't a fence or hedgerow separating these gardens from the open field increase the security at the rear of these gardens or not? Another objection, showing disrespect for the families who have loved ones buried in the cemetery. Does that mean, if I supported this application, I would be showing disrespect to both my parents who are lying there? I beg to challenge them. I am sure that they would love to know, my parents, that their 2 great-grandchildren can cycle close by. As far as encircling the cemetery, I suppose it's up to you and your beliefs. If defeated, do we as planners have a strong enough case to answer whether there to be an appeal? Finally, I have been reminded many times that I was elected to represent the majority of my constituents and not the minority. So I leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kemsley, do you wish to say anything on this? You're waiting. Thank you. Councillor Penlington, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm only speaking as a Prestatyn member and a resident of Prestatyn, as it's been mentioned a couple of times. The Prestatyn to Diseth walkway, as it's commonly known, actually runs across the back end of my garden. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any antisocial behaviour on that track from one end to the other end. There may have been the odd occasion, which I'm not aware of, but it's certainly not an area of antisocial behaviour, I can guarantee that. The only issue we've had is with dog fouling, and public protection are now escalating their work in that area, and that's reduced. The cycle path in Prestatyn is an asset, it's a lovely part of town. Children from babies up to pensioners, everybody uses it. And I will probably be supporting this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Derry-Owen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we're all for cycling, and I understand this is a very good application in some ways. But at this stage in life, and with the restrictions that we have on finance, I have to query with respect of the Welsh Government, is this adding to the Welsh Government's proposal for cycleway from the coast up to the Vale of Clwyd? I don't think it does. And on this stage, I feel that this is a stage that will be done in time, but not at this stage. We need first to get these cyclists coming up the Vale so that they can see what they need, what is needed, and that the cycling routes for Denby and other places will come later as an addition. But to waste this sort of money now on this sort of, I feel, is wrong. And I do feel that this bypass, we should be concentrating as Sustrans on a route from Rhyl along the, probably in Denby here, along the bypass and on to Llanrhaeadr, so that we do get people up to Rhuthun and beyond, and as far as Cynllunio if we can. But this is, and I do feel that I would be voting against this. Thank you.
Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Clearly, this is one of those issues where there's pluses and minuses, and the community, depending on where they happen to live, are split. So you're never going to find something that's going to appeal to everybody. Personally, I have to say I do believe that this perhaps is not the right route for the cycle path, although I do support the cycle path actually going in. I tend to concur with Councillor Bartley that the A525 bypass route would actually be a better solution, but we have to deal with what's before us as a planning application and take it on its merits. I have to say I do have sympathy with those residents who have spoken and written in objection to this particular proposal. I probably would feel exactly the same with this, adjacent to myself. Councillor Davis said that the land ownership issues are a civil matter and not a planning issue, and I quite agree with that. And under normal circumstances, I probably would concur with that statement. However, as Ddinbych County Council actually is the applicant, I think it probably would be behoving upon us as an authority in a wider sense, rather than just speaking as a planning authority, that as a matter of good asset management, if there are issues with regards to the route and potential ownership, that again that would mitigate in favour of an alternative route where we actually own all the land, and therefore there would be no land ownership issues that would potentially delay the scheme in any event. Having said all that, I must admit I'm struggling for grounds for refusal, but I know Councillor Bartley is going to come back on that, so I'll wait for that before making my final decision. But as it stands at the moment, I would be tending to vote against it.
I have two further speakers at the moment, three now, but I'm going to ask the officers to come in first before we go any further. So, did you want to come in?
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. I think just before we get too many queries, myself and Mike might have an opportunity to answer a few things before questions are raised on certain things. Going through some of the points that have been raised there, and I think just as an overarching issue, I think it is important for members to stick to material planning considerations. When you're dealing with any planning application, you have to make a decision based on your adopted planning policies and any other material planning considerations. Issues of land ownership are not material planning considerations, and as Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill raised there, that's something that we would have to disregard in relation to this. We'd also have to disregard potential alternative routes, because that's not what's before you today. What's before you is a proposed route that you've got there, it's been consulted on. There's a lot of information in the report and on the blue sheets and on the yellow sheet around that particular route. That's what we're having to assess, that's what you're going to make the decision on. I'll bring Mike in a second just to answer some of the technical questions about the highway safety issues. What are material planning considerations, though? Because I think members need to know what it is we're going to assess and what we're going to be looking at by way of material planning considerations. Well, highway safety clearly is a material planning consideration. If members feel as though there's some concern around this particular route in terms of highway safety for vehicles, for pedestrians, for cyclists, for any of the users, again, we need to have evidence of what that highway safety issue is. From members, and Mike will be able to answer some questions on that. The other thing that's been raised so far this morning is an issue around fear of crime or antisocial behaviour. Again, we'd need to have some form of evidence to defend the decision that this particular route and the users of this route would increase the risk and the fear of crime. But they are material planning considerations. You can make a decision on those two issues Just asking you to be careful and consider those points before you make that decision. I'll bring Mike in now to just answer a few points on the highway safety factor.
Thank you. Whenever highway safety is discussed, there's always a certain subjectivity to it. What one person considers to be dangerous, another person wouldn't. So for that reason, as professional officers, we have to deal with fact wherever possible. So let's present some facts for this case. Average speeds: Park Street, 20 miles an hour. Estrad Road, 24 miles per hour. Brookhouse Road, 19 miles per hour. Two-way daily flows of traffic: 460 vehicles on Park Street. Estrad Road, 585 vehicles. Brookhouse Road, 500 vehicles. These are all lightly trafficked routes. In comparison, an A road going into Rhuthun, you would expect more like 8,000 to 10,000 vehicles a day, to try and give you a bit of comparison. Based on these speeds and the proposed geometry, all new junctions have been checked and they all comply with the relevant visibility criteria as set out in Table B of 1018. The new designs have been subject to an independent road safety audit, as we've already heard. That has found no issues with these junctions. There's been some minor issues with aspects of the route, but that is what you would expect on any highway scheme. There's actually a condition attached to this that the full detailed design would have to be considered and approved by the planning authority, subject to implementation on site. Again, that's normal practice for any scheme of this nature. There's been some issues mentioned about width. The bulk of the route will be 3 metres wide, but there are some sections where it will be below this. I refer you to Department for Transport publication, Local Transport Note 1/12. This is the same guidance that does suggest, and it's guidance, that 3 metre in most cases is the minimum recommended for a multi-user active travel route. However, the very same guidance says, and I quote here, a narrower route might offer a considerable improvement over existing conditions. The existing conditions in this case, in terms of a cycle route between Ddinbych and Rhuthun, are several miles of on-road route, albeit on fairly quiet country lane, but a lane that is subject to 60 miles per hour speed limit. In terms of the start and finish of the route, at the moment people say, well, where's it going to go to and from? The thing we need to consider is every route has to start somewhere, and that even the route as presented still provides an excellent recreational facility for local people of Ddinbych, for both recreation and for shorter commuter journeys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got Councillor Bill Cowie next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As a non-resident of Ddinbych, I took time out last Saturday morning, spent an hour and a half going round the proposed route, so I'm not speaking just from what I've seen on paper. But my question is, what form did the consultation take place as far as road safety is concerned? Did the planning department consult with the police, for instance? And if so, I haven't seen any report in this report from the police, and I'd just like an answer to that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, as a standard, again, for any application of this type, at this stage, it's a Stage 1 and 2 road safety audit, which has been carried out subsequent to the design. There will be a Stage 3 audit would be carried out again for any scheme of this nature once it's actually constructed on site, and the police attend those audits as usually as a matter of course.
Okay. Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts, please.
Thank you, Chair. May I also I took some time out yesterday to walk the route as well, which is of interest. And if I may, just on the consultation first, the maps you were given us, I'm struggling to see where I find Townsend and Pentreth and Ryder on there. Because it doesn't appear to be on this map that obviously was used in the consultation, which is of interest, considering that it was meant to start from Townsend to Pentreth and Ryder. I also note from the application that there is no There is no school route or safer route to schools involved in this application, which is of interest, considering here in Rhuthun we're actually looking at building schools on the cycle track on the Safe Schools route, which should be give consideration. But yesterday, the road safety issue quite clearly hit me as I stood outside the farm at Ystrad, looking at the corner towards the old Bronduffin School and left back towards Denby High School, where a car came at a rate of knots, one way which I didn't see until late, and also a wagon came, because what I can see is boy races heaven, the brow of the hill, it is ideal to jump and take it as they do in these days. And that's not the road there, that's Brookhouse, isn't it? The road that I'm talking about, there isn't any pictures on, because it's a brow of a hill, and we really should have that picture.
That's it.
Where?
Go back. Go back.
That's it.
That's the brow.
That's the brow of the hill.
That's the brow of the hill.
Yeah, just beyond that.
Yeah,
the
that's
farm is on the other side.
this side.
Yeah, the corner's on the other side.
Yeah, we need to take it from the other side of the corner, really, because that's where the danger there as well. And I think that is really, really interesting, because what we have to live with, however we vote on this, that if you picture yourself a child crossing a road on a bike and falls off, it is not secure. If there was a tunnel underneath of the bridge of the road, I think it would be a far safer option. And I'm all pro cycling. I've got a bike, but it really is. Doesn't seem to me a really fair option on the top brow of the hill, on that corner. If a child falls off, we have to live with that, which way we vote with this, and I think that's really important. I also note that the town council is against this. On 3 votes, I understand, has voted against it on three times in this consultation process. But I also know the majority of objections are from Denby people, and the majority of the majority of 4 are from Denby people, and the objections are from away, Neston, Gwynedd. Local people know their area, and sometimes we have to listen to what they say. I urge you, on the ground of safety, that this route go back to the drawing board in support of Councillor Ray Bartley and get something safe for the children and the people of Denby.
Would you like to come in, Hugh?
Diolch yn fawr, siarad yn Gymraeg os mae'n gyfleus. Fi ddim ar cynllunio, mi wedi bod rheswm bod fi'n siarad heddiw, bod fi o dan Hamdden, Rised Grol Hamdden yn Sir Ddinbych. Rhaid fi'n neud siŵr bod fi'n siarad ar y cynllun ei hun. Cos mae hwnna'n bwysig, mae'n y ddau o'r cynghorwyr wedi steinio ffwrdd o'r peth, ond hynny gymryd o fel mae'n dod. Y cwestiwn fwyaf o fi di, mae'r rhai fwyaf o'r objections wedi cael ei ymateb, efo ar un, sori mae tudalen enwedd ddim arno fi, ond fi di printio ffwrdd, 1.1.6, independent road safety, mae di cael ei wneud, hefyd, fel mae Paul Pellington wedi sôn, efo, os ydych chi'n cael rhyw tir, mae'n dweud reit ar diwedd 4.2.4, reit ar y llinell ola, os mae'n dweud mae'n noted that an area is already in use, mae'n a member of public, mae'n dweud os mae'n fwy o bobl yn dynyddio lle, bydd lai o bethau'n digwydd yn y lle fel anti-social behaviour. Ond y cwestiwn fi eisiau gofyn dweud gwir ar un ydy 1.1.8. Mae'n dweud bod yna CTG, Community Travel Group, a mae wedi cael ei consultation, mae'n dweud all Denby councillors. Ydy'n meddwl councillors Sir Ddinbych neu Dre Ddinbych, a hefyd mae'n tôn am Llanrhaeadr a officers i gyd. Pa mae hwn, ond yn ei ymateb yn ôl gen nhw i ddod yn ôl be o'n nhw ydi deud yn diwedd, cos mae nhw wedi delu cychwyn ers 2012, a siŵr mae gen nhw rhyw ymateb i ddod, cos mae'n deud mae'n deud cynghorwydd o Ddinbych ar y grŵp yma, a be oedd o'n ymateb i nhw, ac o'n nhw'n rhaid input i fewn i'r peth. Diolch.
Okay, as he refers to county councillors, and the group is in effect a steering group that was charged basically with developing the route. I've not been party to any particular response from the group, but obviously the group was in support of it in terms of its development.
Thank you. Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about lighting. I would imagine in certain parts there is going to be lighting along the route. I know in the cycle route that was placed at the back of Brincunning Road, the main issue there was the lighting because it disrupted the nearby residents' sleep at night. And they didn't all have blackout curtains, as was once suggested. Could I ask what sort of lighting is going in there? I can't see it clearly enough on the actual plans. I know that some parts of the route are already lit, but there will be in the smaller areas lighting. I really think that that should be a big consideration of this, because it wasn't something that was anticipated when they did the Gypsy Lane one on Brincunning Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arwel Roberts, please.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Madam Cadeirydd. Mi fes I ar y daith digon diddorol o gwmpas Ddinbych, ac chydig o bethau oedd yn codi I fy meddwl I felly. Y fynwent I ddechrau, mae hwnna'n le sanctaidd wedi cyfan, a da chi eisiau gyrru llwybr beic drwyddo fo. Dwi'n gwybod ar y ffiniau, ie. Un peth sy'n poeni fi, os bydd na gnebrwn yno, a fyddwch chi yn gofalu na fydd rhywun yn teithio ar y llwybr beics pan fydd na gnebrwn. Dydw ddim eisiau cael pobl yn mynd trwy'r fynwent tra mae yna gnebrwn yn digwydd. Mae, yn ôl bob tebyg, mae'r llwybrau yma yn lefydd sydd mewn bodolaeth yn barod lot o'n nhw, a mae teuluoedd ifanc yn hoffi mynd ar hyd y llwybrau yma I gael gweld byd natur a cael awyr iach am yna cwn am dro ac yn y blaen. Tybed ydych chi wedi edrych I mewn, ydyn nhw yn mynd I gael ei effeithio pan mynd na feics yn dod lawr y llwybrau yma, ac efallai bydd na ddamweiniau nid yn unig ar y ffyrdd, ond ar y llwybrau. Mae yna beryglon mawr, dwi'n meddwl, yn ffordd ystrad. Ie, fedrwch chi daflu gwybodaeth I ni am cyflymdra ac yn y blaen, cyflymdra y ceir ac yn y blaen, a faint o geir sy'n mynd lawr yna. Ond mae'r ffyrdd yn ffyrdd sydd wedi bod yna blynyddoedd. A maen nhw'n ffyrdd peryglus. Dwi wedi teithio mewn car o'n nhw mwy nag unwaith, ac oedd mynd i'r ochr. Felly mae yna beryglon yn ffordd ystrad a ffordd tŷ brwcws yn anffodus. A dwi mewn sefyllfa digon anodd. Dwi dros marchogaeth beics yn sicr. Ond dwi yn ame fydda I yn mynd efo cynghorydd Raymond Bartley efo hyn. Diolch.
Officers, do you wish to come back on anything there?
The lights, I think, in particular.
Yeah. First of all, in answer to Councillor Chamberlain-Jones's question, there is no lighting proposed as part of the proposal. Okay. Councillor Roberts' concerns. Firstly, I mean, there are no special arrangements that would be in place should a funeral service be taking place, but it would be expected for anything like that that users of the route would exercise appropriate discretion. We have to. The bottom line is we have to accept people are reasonable, and there's nothing to suggest that users of cycle routes or pedestrians are going to act any differently to any other member of the public. With regard to road safety, I come back to what I said earlier. We have to base these decisions on fact and whether they meet design standards. We searched our accident database on the routes. For Estrad Road and for Brookhouse Road, in the vicinities of where these junctions are proposed, there have been no accidents since 1981, which is when our records began. I keep hearing things like it's a dangerous route. We have to base this on fact. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had a pretty good debate there. I'm going to ask Councillor Kensal if she wants to come in now, and then I'm going back to Councillor Bartley. Oh, yeah. Take any more now.
Diolch.
I didn't get any more.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Fel da chi'n gwybod, fel mae pob cynghorydd yn gwybod, fedrwch chi ddim plesio pawb. Ac dwi'n cynrychioli ward canol, lle mae na lot o bryderon. Ond dwi wedi derbyn llythyrau gan trigolion yn byw yn fy ward o blaid, a hefyd, wrth gwrs, rhai yn erbyn. Ac felly fyddai ddim yn plesio pawb, ond mi fyddai yn trio gwneud y peth cywir. Den ni wedi bod yn trio ers blynyddoedd, bron i 20 mlynedd rwan, yn Ddinbych, i gael llwybr beicio. Ac mae hwn yn dod o'r Llywodraeth, ac fel mae'r siaradwr o blaid wedi deud, mae hwn yn rhan o polisi cadw'n iach. Dwi wedi poeni braidd am glywed y pwyslais ar crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. Be sydd yn neud i beicwyr cael enw mor ddrwg a hynny? A rhaid i ni gofio, mae bobl yn gallu mynd i'r mynwent beth bynnag rwan. Does na ddim byd yn erbyn nhw chwarae pêl-droed yna, bobl ifanc, fel enghraifft. Ond mae'r bobl, y beicwyr dwi'n adnabod, i gyd yn gyfrifol. Ac yn enwedig os ydyn nhw'n rhieni isio mynd allan efo'u plant. Ond ni'n pasio tu teras echdwy, Post Office Lane. A dyna lle oedd na blant a beiciau bach tu allan i'w drysau. Mae'n hanner tymor. Lle fedrwn nhw fynd ar hyn o bryd? Felly, a'r peth arall, ar y safle, pan o'n i'n mynd rownd efo Mike Parker o'r adran priffyrdd, nes i wrando nastyd ar beth oedd o'n deud. Ac petai ni'n gwrthod hwn ar oherwydd pryderon i wneud â diogelwch, dydy hwnna ddim yn dal dŵr. Nhw di'r bobl proffesiynol, ac fel mae'r adroddiad yn deud ar 4.2.7, an independent road safety audit has been commissioned. Wel, os da ni ddim yn licio be maen nhw'n deud, iawn, ond dyna be mae'r bobl proffesiynol ac annibynnol yn deud, bod does na ddim achos pryder ynglyn â diogelwch ar hwn. Ddim yn neis i rhai bobl, mae o wrach yn cael rhyw fath o effaith, ond mae'n rhaid i ni ddechrau rhywle yn Ddinbych. Mae'n hen bryd i teuluoedd cael rhywle i fynd ar beic efo i plant nhw.
Now I have two more members who have indicated they wish to speak, so I'm not taking any more after this one. Thank you. So, Councillor Mary Lloyd Davies, please.
Diolch yn fawr, Madam Cadeirydd. Da ni clywed heddiw bore bod ni ddim ymgynghoriad i bod ar un rhan o'r daith feic yma. Tybed sa chi'n hoffi deud beth i y problem efo hynny, os ydy hynny'n gwneud y cais yn wel, ddylen ni mo'i drafod allu, nes bod neu drafodaeth wedi bod hefo yr rhan hwnnw. Fi ystyried hefyd i ffordd ystrad roi twnnel, lle fi a bont ys dalwm, oedd y tren yn mynd o danodd. Os na fi, pam? Ac os ydyn ni di ystyried, pam nad os na fi, ydy'r gost normod neu be. A di'r ffyrdd ydyn ni'n cyfeirio atynt heddiw bore hefyd, yn ffyrdd agored i'r cyhoedd. i farchogaeth beic neu gerdded arnynt. A ddirfynwent yma pan oedd y tren yn teithio o Ddinbych i Rhuthun. Neu ydy'n y fynwent newydd ers hynny. Ac hefyd, a nid i sôn am bod na dipyn o yrru ar ffordd ystrad, a da ni wedi teithio ffordd na i fynd i Saron ac yn y blaen. Oes posib rhoi llai o gyflymder o 60 i lawr dydwch i 40 neu 30 neu beth bynnag. Os o posib gwneud hynny i arbed nhw yrru gormod. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Councillor Rhys Hughes, please.
Diolch yn fawr. Sorry, this has been a long time coming, hasn't it? We've been at it for an hour. To be honest, I find it... I live in Llangollen, and it's quite sad, really, to come to applications like this, really, where you've got a town that's quite obviously split. And when you live the other side of the county, it's not very... You've got to stand back and look at it. And we've been sent loads of things by email. Numbers of us have been phoned up, and from both sides, which is fair enough. So I've got a couple of questions, because I think most of the debate's been had. This independent safety report, have we seen it? That's one question. I suppose we have, and I've missed it somewhere along the line. The other one is, I visited that picture there. The only times I've ever been there were on taking the boys to wear the games. And I tell you what, when we're all parked up that bridge, over that bridge, and over the other side of that Goblin Farm, you wouldn't want to... I've always thought there's an accident waiting to happen. I know that doesn't happen very often, but they do have events in the school, and the cars are parked up that road. Now, I might have my geography wrong here. I probably got it wrong. Top end of that road, where does it come out? Can anybody from Denby tell me? No, the very top of it. Where does it come out?
Goblin.
Right at the very top?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Just so I know where I am. The other thing is, if this committee happens to go against this today, I would like to know, before the vote, this is an awkward question I suppose, will the officers be going to appeal? So I think we need to know that.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll pick up on Councillor Lloyd Davis's questions first. Firstly, with regard to the consultation, there was a consultation exercise undertaken in 2012 which presented 4 routes, I believe, quite a sort of small-scale plan. The 80% of the respondents to that, which was something like 700 respondents to the 7,000 that went out, basically chose in favour of traffic-free routes. Now, the traffic-free route, as was presented in that consultation, differs over a length of approximately 200-300 metres in terms of the fact that instead of going through the high school fields, as was in that consultation, it instead takes the route down the access road to the old rectory, St David's House, and along the back of the Middle Park fields. Now, at that stage, we were consulting on that proposal. We obviously had negotiations with the school, which we exhausted, and it meant we had to choose a different route. What we need to look at is the principle, because what people were choosing, in our opinion, was a traffic-free route, as opposed to a route on existing roads or a route alongside the A525. Because I've had many people say to me, if they're looking to take their children out, novice cyclists or people who haven't cycled for years, do they want to be cycling alongside a 60-mile-an-hour road or bypass, or cycling along traffic-free routes, which are quieter and much more attractive? With regard to did we consider a tunnel, one, is a lot more expensive. They're not inviting places. They tend to be dark and damp, even if only a relatively short length. And really, it's the kind of feature that the general consensus and design guidance across the UK is to avoid subways and so on. And certainly where you do see subways, they're passing under busy multi-lane city streets, not under a quiet road which carries 500 vehicles, 600 vehicles a day. with regard to the date of the cemetery, I personally couldn't tell you which came first, the cemetery or the railway, but I would be pretty sure that they were there at the same time, given the dates on some of the graves. With regard to Westwood Road and speeds, within the proposal it shows a relocation of the existing 30-mile-an-hour limit, where it's currently on the brow of the hill of the old railway bridge, to a location round the bend past Goblin Farm, just on the sort of straight that goes past the front of the cemetery. I believe also there would be merit in actually moving that further along that road and actually to encompass the cemetery entrance as well. But that's really finer detail. In regard to Councillor Hughes's questions, independent road safety audit, I believe, is included in these documents as part of the plan materials. With regard to would we choose to appeal, you've got to remember, as a local authority, since the Active Wales Travel Act came in, we have a duty to expand and improve our cycle network, and there's a very clear missing link in central Denbighshire. We have a very well-developed route in the north of St Asaph. We have routes, as you know, in the Dee Valley now, but there's very little. There's a bit that we've done in recent years in Rhuthun, but there's a glaring gap, in my opinion, in the Denby area. So we would certainly be considering all options open to us in regard to obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No further. I think we've had an hour at this. We've had
just one last point.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
There's also a point that Councillor Helders Roberts raised earlier, which was with regard to the title on the drawings as Townsend to Pentrith Land Rider. That is basically the overall route that this forms part of, but the application is as what is indicated on the plan. Okay.
Thank you. We have an officer recommendation to grant this application. Do I have anyone who is willing to propose that? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tom.
Just say that the reference was made by Mike now about the various routes. Let's remember that the A525, there are routes from Rhuthun to St Asaph, there are routes from Cael to Rhuthun, all on the major roads. He quoted speed limits 20, 18, 16, 19, whatever. I've yet to see a car not exceeding that speed limit on those roads that he's mentioned. And therefore, Madam Chairman, I'd like to propose a refusal for this application on general highway issues. Safety for all, narrow roads, visibility, especially around the start of the proposed track, Ustrud Bridge and the Brookhouse area. Privacy, activity very near neighbouring properties, and noise, environmental issues due to increased activity.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder to that proposal? Councillor Cowan. Right, I'll hand over to you now.
So,
You've got your reasons.
yeah, no. So we've got one proposal in front of us, which is to refuse on the grounds that Councillor Bartley has put forward, which are reasonable planning grounds. So, I mean, obviously the officer recommendation is to grant, but what I can say is that the reasons for refusal are being put forward are reasonable planning grounds and are focused on the material planning considerations. I think we've had 13 members have spoken and asked questions and made statements. I think the debate's been going on for over an hour. So I think you've had a good debate and you've understood clearly what the key issues are. In the end, you're here acting as the local planning authority. You're judging the merits of a planning application. So I appreciate as county councillors you'll have a view, but actually you're here as the planning authority. So you have to take a planning view, and you need to come to your own conclusions on those planning merits. And what I can say is the debate has focused on predominantly on the planning issues, the material planning merits. The questions and the issues have been well raised, and hopefully you've had the answers. And it's now time to come to the vote. So you've got the decision to make as members of the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think we are now ready to go to the vote. When the board is cleared, obviously you will be pressing plus to grant, which would be in accordance with the officer recommendation, and you would be pressing minus to refuse, as ever. So if we clear the board, please, and all vote now. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We have 9 in favour of that application and 14 against, with a total of 23 votes being cast. Therefore, the application is refused. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just say that I have grave concerns that a project like this has been taking a lot of time of officers, etc., in this time of austerity and the amount of cuts that we're making in the budgets that we have. And I just wonder how this has had the priority that it has, and whether this could be convened to our higher officers to look into this in the future. Thank you.
All I can say on that is obviously that's not a planning issue. If you want to raise that elsewhere through scrutiny or whatever, then there's obviously other routes to do so.
I see no reason that we from planning here could put this forward, though.
Councillor Clinton.
I have to refute that. And if we're in a period of austerity, we must ask why we're in a period of austerity. And safe routes and health are still issues of importance, whether it's time of austerity or not.
I'd leave it there.
I think the general consensus is that everybody wants a panel. So, could we please come back at 5 to 11?
Okay, well done.
Item agenda number 6, the Ward Denbigh Lower. Ward members, myself and Councillor Richard Davis. Application number 01/2014/1390/PF. The proposal is for the erection of an extension and alterations to dwelling at 51 Mitten Park, Denbigh. And the applicant is Mr John Cameron, and the officer's recommendation is to grant. We have a speaker on this application, Mr Mark Evans. Mr Evans, would you like to come up, please? You have 3 minutes, Mr Evans, to address the meeting.
I'm representing the objections to the proposed extension at 51 Mitten Park, but my main concern is that of my mother, Mrs Evans, of 11 Dalawen. She has suffered with depression for some years, and the proposed extension has caused her added stress since the first application at the end of 2014. She uses the garden extensively in the summer, sitting out and having grandchildren and great-grandchildren making use of her garden. The proposed extension will shadow her garden, making it dull and uninviting. Everyone has a right to light. In short, it will have a detrimental effect on her mental health. The full-length windows to the side will have full view of the neighbour's kitchen and porch, giving them no privacy. And the windows will also overlook gardens of the other objecting neighbours. I urge you to consider the future happiness of an 86-year-old lady and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Evans. Members, you have some information on your blue sheet, which includes a report following a site visit. Right. I'll put the item open for debate. Councillor Richard Davis as ward member.
Thank you, Chair. On the same date as the last site meeting, we went, Councillor Arwell Roberts, myself, Councillor Bartley, and there was another one, with Ian and Denise, was there? We went to the 51 Mitten Park. As you can see from the blue papers, the first application was refused on grounds that it was too close to the boundaries and overlooking into the neighbouring garden. Now, if you look at that picture there now, the new proposal is those two windows are coming out. Yes, the building is coming out towards you, but there will be two slatted windows frosted, so they won't actually be able to look over into the garden. Still, we're talking about an 86-year-old woman. I've got a mother-in-law 86, and she's very confused as well. So what's going on around the house? But I appreciate we don't have to take that into consideration. But as far as I can see of the boundary, the fence boundary, not the hedge, the fence boundary to the proposed extension, there is a slight dispute. So the measurements could be slightly different. So I leave it to you to assess the case.
I'll take questions 3 at a time. Cynghorydd Arwell Roberts fel aelod ar ei fynd I lawr I Mitten Parks, na chi eisiau dod I fewn, sgwylwch y dda.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Gawson ni ryw gwarter awr yno yn edrych ar y sefyllfa yn do. Ac mae yr ymgeisydd wedi rhoi un wal ar ongl. O'n i'n gweld hynny bod wedi trio bob peth I blesio. Bod un ochr i'r wal bod yn cael ei rhoi ar ongl fel yna, yn lle bod yn mynd fel yna. Felly, os warswch chi darn o bren gynne, dyna'r plan, dyna cynllun, gwaelod y cynllun felly. Mae'r ymgeisydd yma wedi trio ei bob peth I beidio amharu ar bobl sydd yn byw gyferbyn felly. Yn gwybod bod mae gennym fo bethau llawer I ofyn am estyniad, a dwi'n gweld unrhyw awgrym a fedrwn ni wrthod hyn yn y marn I, Mr Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd. Any more speakers? Anybody moving anything? It's been proposed by Councillor Rhys Hughes that the officer's recommendation be approved and seconded by Councillor Bill Tasker. Officers, any comments or do you want to go straight to the vote?
Well, not really, Chair. I mean, the members have seen this for themselves. I mean, there are never clear-cut issues with overlooking, etc., and I think everybody was trying to take into account the genuine concerns of the neighbour. But you have to try and deal with these on a consistent basis and with regard to your policies and guidance. And whilst, fully respecting impacts on people, I think it's a very difficult one, perhaps, to base a decision on the emotional side of things, which comes out like this. So whilst respecting that side of it, I mean, the officer view, Chair, it would be that the proposals here generally do fit your policies and your guidance, and hence that's the reason the recommendation is for grant. Thank you.
It's been proposed by Councillor Rhys Hughes, seconded by Councillor Bill Tasker. Mr Mead, please.
Thank you, Chair. If we go to the vote then now, please. It will be plus to grant in accordance with the officer recommendation and minus to refuse. If we clear the board, please. And all vote now. Thank you.
In favour of the application, 20, abstentions 2, against 1, total 23. Therefore, that application has been granted. Move on to agenda item number 7. Llandurnog, Councillor Mervyn Parry, the ward member, application number 18, 2014. Sorry, my apologies. Must be confusion of the big debate last time. Item number 9, my apologies. Ward Llanarmon yn Iar, stroke Llandegla, Councillor Martin Holland, application number 21, stroke 2014, stroke 0032, stroke BC. And the proposal is for the erection of a wooden tool store and shelter for managing the woodland, a retrospective application, the big covert at Clwyd Forest, Maes Havn, Mould. And the applicant is Mr Jonathan Edwards, and the officer's recommendation is to grant. We have a speaker against this application, Mr Alan Morgans, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr Morgan, to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Alan Morgans. I'm a resident of Maes Havn, adjacent to the big covert where the development has already taken place. I offer 3 objections to the development as follows. The first is the development in an area of outstanding natural beauty, and Planning Policy Wales covering the improvement National Heritage Chapter 5 states the following. Section 529, Trees and Woodland. Local planning authorities should seek to protect areas of woodland where they have a natural heritage, value or contribution to the character or amenity of a particular locality. Section 535, Measures to Conserve Landscape. Designing areas of outstanding natural beauty is for the conservation and enhancement of their natural beauty. Development planning policies and development management decisions should favour the conservation of natural beauty. This owner of the development has already removed trees to open up the view and erected a permanent structure which is clearly visible from the opposite side of the valley. He has also erected a tent. What you see from the roadway looks completely out of place. Everything about the land suggests it's been used for recreational purposes rather than conservation and enhancement of the natural beauty or managing the woodland. The second objection is under Denbighshire's own local development plan. The area in question is subject to the following policy, which states VOE1, key area of areas of importance. Area will be protected from development that would adversely affect them. Any development should maintain and enhance the area for its character, local distinctiveness and value to the community. VOE2, valuing our environment. In determining development proposals within areas of outstanding natural beauty or areas of beauty, developments that would cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the landscape will not be permitted. I presume you've visited the site or have seen photographs of the site, and it is clear the existing developments in Big Covert totally ignore planning policy guidance and the covenants that were enforced at the time the land was bought. They fall far short of all the requirements for development in woodlands and areas of outstanding natural beauty, and do actually adversely affect the character, appearance and distinctiveness of the Big Covert. Also, in their application, the owners claim the developments will make a positive contribution to the local community. Well, the developments have been there for over 12 months, and it's long enough for the village to see the so-called benefits. I would question what these benefits are. We have not seen any economic benefits, and in fact, their presence has actually resulted in arguments between owners and some residents trying to use well-established footpaths through the woods. And third, on the principle of precedent, should planning consent be given and the development remain, you will set the precedent and effectively give the green light for further developments in Big Covert and other woodlands in Denbighshire. The proliferation has already begun, in that other similar developments have already taken place in the woodland.
Thank you, Mr Morgan. Thank you. Mr Mead, do you want to lead on this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give a brief bit of information, if I may, just in relation to permitted development rights. Where you've got an agricultural use or you've got a forestry use, what your planning legislation, it's not Denbighshire's legislation, we've got our own adopted policies, but it's national legislation, planning legislation under the Town and Country Planning Act. People have the rights under permitted development to erect certain structures within their forests for the purposes of forestry activity. And if they are proposing to do such forestry activity and they want some sort of structure in that forest to store their equipment and tools, etc., they can get in touch with the local planning authority and say to them, this is what I'm intending to do. Do I require your prior approval to do such things? this is not just in Denbighshire, this is across Wales. This is what happens. And Denbighshire County Council and other authorities have got the right to sort of look at the structure that's being proposed, and what we've got to do is we've got to assess, and it's not easy, believe me, because there's not really any clear definitions in relation to this, what sort of forestry activity is going on, and what is being proposed by way of a structure. Is it reasonable? Now, obviously, if we were discovering very large structures in our forests, and believe me, we have been doing in certain instances, where these structures look a little bit beyond somebody undertaking forestry activity, i.e. they might have deckings, awnings, small paddling pools, tents, jacuzzis, hot tubs, etc., then clearly those are the types of things that we want to be taking action over. And we've got lists of these particular developments that have been appearing in our forests, and we are taking that action. I think the local member will probably acknowledge that there's been a number of visits in various forests with officers to look at these. What we have to do in this instance, obviously, of course, is deal with what is before us. And we've got 2 applications on the agenda today. And this is a proposal for the erection of a wooden tool store and shelter for managing the woodland. The structure is what you see before you there on the photograph. And we as officers, having liaised with a number of bodies, such as Coed Cymru and others, and looked at the information that's been supplied with the application by the applicant, have got to decide whether we think it's reasonable and whether we think we can grant planning permission for this structure because it's in connection with a forestry activity. We've come to the conclusion as officers that we think it is. Obviously, if we grant planning permission today and we go down to the forest in a week or so and there's more paraphernalia with this particular activity and there's people staying overnight and there's issues going on there that are beyond that forestry activity, we've got the legal powers to take action over that. What we've got to do with these applications, though, is deal with what's before us and what's being proposed. So we've made a recommendation on that basis. The problem that we're getting around Denbighshire is that these forestry owners are apportioning areas of their forest off. They're selling them to individuals. In an ideal world, what we might be finding is that individuals have got a genuine interest in forestry, buy these plots and come down there and undertake a bit of forestry work as a hobby, and they need a tool shed and they put the tool shed there. That is potentially happening in some instances, but in other instances it's not. We're finding people that are just turning up there and wanting a holiday and spending their time with their family. So it's a difficult area. It's a very difficult area, not just for Denbighshire, but it's a difficult area across Wales because the legislation that you've got, that you're dealing with, isn't particularly helpful and it isn't particularly clear. But that's all that we've got to go on. And so you have to make a judgment as members today as whether you're looking at that particular shed, it's within a forest, it's within the AONB, is that reasonable for somebody to have to go on there and undertake forestry activities? We as officers think it is. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Mead. Ward Member, I'll open it up for debate. Councillor Martin Holland.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This issue, this saga has been ongoing for some time. Can I say that if you go down to the woods today, not everything you see there is what it should be. And I think this is a classic example. This is not just happening in the big covert at Maeshaven, it is happening in other woodland across Wales, where parts of woodlands are being sold off in plots. That's the issue, plots, ranging from 2 acres, anything up in the big covert here to 7 acres, smallest is 2, the biggest so far has been 7. And that there are websites that are actually advising people that they can actually acquire these pieces of woodland and use permitted development rights, and as long as they say that it is only for forestry work, in other words to store your tools in, you can get away with a structure like this particular one. Across Denbighshire I'm aware of 4 other woodlands where land is being sold off in plots like this, in Rhuthun, in Gweddarllediad, in Rhuthun. I'm conscious that in Rhuthun, for example, one plot owner has already put up his Mongolian yurt to accommodate him and his family at the weekends when they come down. Sadly, when plots like this are sold, people want to make their mark on them. They've bought a piece of land, a piece of forest in North Wales. They want to put their markers there. They want to establish a building to stay in or to visit in. They put up fences. They put up signs saying, you know, private woodland now, please don't trespass. If you look at this particular site, Big Covert, there's 85 hectares of woodland. I'm aware so far that 7 have been sold in individual plots ranging from 2 to 7 acres. 3 of them have already put up buildings, and 2 of them we'll be looking at today. The 3rd one we've been chasing through the enforcement officer because they've created a campsite with Wendy houses, plastic paddling pools, you name it. Far from it being used for forestry work, it's being used as a holiday retreat at weekends. Let's look at this particular application. As you look at this building, it has a veranda on the front. What you don't see from this photograph is that actually this is in the style of a log cabin, and on the front where the veranda is, there are glass French doors and windows. The building has been elevated at such a level that it looks out, because they've cleared the trees in front, not behind, in front, and it looks out over the valley to the triple SI known as Bryn Allen. So the tools for this particular group are having a marvellous time. When they come home after working in this piece of forest, they throw open the French doors, they come out onto the balcony above, and they have a cold beer. When they're not having a cold beer, there's a fire pit next to this particular dwelling. And you can't mean to tell me that for forestry purposes you need a fire pit. That in itself is actually worrying to see that sort of development in an area like this. My concern is that we're setting a precedent. If we agree to this today, we are actually opening the gates to far more developments within this particular woodland. As I say, to date, only 7 plots have been sold off, potential for God knows how many more in 85 hectares. It is within an area of a designated area of outstanding natural beauty, and if we're not careful, we will end up with what I can only describe as shanty towns in our woodland across Denbighshire, with all the knock-on effects that will have on the local communities. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that we should oppose this application for 2 reasons. That it is not for purpose. In other words, this is not for just storing tools. And by the way, I meant to say that when we visited this particular site, and I've been up there numerous times with some of the enforcement officers, this particular building also had evidence of insulation materials inside. So again, you know, you have to ask the question, if you're just storing tools here, why do we need French windows? Why do we need a balcony? Why does the shed need a view across the valley opposite, to the point of felling all the trees around it? And why do tools need insulation material? So I believe that this is not for purpose, and therefore it should be rejected, and also that it will have a visual impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty. If you go across the valley from here and stand at Bryn Allen on the triple SI and look back to this forest, you will see the gap in the trees where they have felled them, and you will see this building on the side. I think for the sake of not only Brig Covert and the area of outstanding natural beauty, but for all our woodlands in Denbighshire, we need to be taking a stance on this and saying that this is unacceptable. On a final point, Mr. Chairman, because I believe this is a bigger issue, I would ask that members today reject this on those grounds, but also that they write to their local AMs and say that there is a need for a change in planning regulations and guidance in relation to developments in woodland here in Wales. And personally, I have no problem with a true woodland operator having a building to store his tools in to manage woodland. But when woodland is 85 hectares, you can understand the need for that. When it's 2 acres or 5 acres, why do they need a building to store tools in? And keep in mind that this particular woodland, 85 hectares, has never required a building in it to maintain tools for forestry management. So why all of a sudden do we need them when the acreage is down to 2 or 7? I recommend that we oppose this, reject this application, and that I ask members to contact their AMs to get the legislation in Wales changed so that we do not face this again in the future.
Thank you very much. Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry, gwelwch yn dda.
Hello, Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to support Martin on this application. You know, there's an area in Rhyl I can see what's happened. They're going to be abused. You know, Martin mentions 85 hectares here. If you convert that into old money, like I remember, it's 215 acres. And if we put an average plot on these of 5 acres a plot, that's putting around about 45 of these buildings up into that forest. Now, you know, we're looking at the long term here, and if we look back in 15 years' time at that wood and look at 45 to 50 shanty-type sheds in that hut, somebody's going to say, what the heck have we done here? You know, it's a disgrace, and I think as a county we should be taking it, as well as to our MPs, but we should be taking it to Welsh Government to say we've got a problem here, and it's going to be a problem. You know, the one in Hell is going to be the same. This is going to look a mess. And once they're advertised on a website like that, it's easy for somebody to come into the country and buy one of these, look at the policies, abuse it. It's an easy one to abuse. Some genuine people try to put genuine things up on allotments and things like that, and we know that they'd need a shed on allotments, which is coming into a similar sort of a rule. But, you know, this is purely going to be abused, and I think we need to, as a county, be strong on it and try and help Martin on this application and help the county on stopping the place turning into a mess. Thank you, Chair.
I'll take 3 questions at a time. Cynghorydd Meirig Davies.
Diolch yn fawr, Sgredydd. Dwi'n sylwi ar y pennawd y cais, ond wrach bod fi yn cam ddeall hwnnw. Codi storfa, offer pren a lloches ar gyfer rheoli'r coetir. Llan cahidi'r lloches. Llan llun o'r lloches, dwi'n meddwl nag oes? Dim ond hwn, ia. Eisiau gwybod lle mae'r lloches ydw i. Ac yn ail, mae'n fframwaith, mi sylwch yn y llun yma, o flaen y cwt, dwi'n cymryd mae i lawr pren le hwnnw. Dyn nhw'n mynd i ista yn gwylio'r coed yn tyfu neu be mae o. Ydych chi, mae'n od i mi pan bod yna. Os yna rhywbeth yn deitha ni bod nhw'n ail blannu coed yn y lle maen nhw wedi tywlu'r coed, bod yna gryniant i blannu coed newydd, dyna ydych chi'n neud mewn coetir ynddo. Yn yr amlinellau yn y gwylod, be ydych chi'n ganiatáu fel amodau, use of the building unigol. Os oes yna ddau adeilad, ydych chi eisiau'r ddau fod o dan yr amod yna. Dwi'n yn gweld dim amod sydd yn caniatáu dim ond rheoli'r coetir yn ei clywed gen y cynghorydd ynglŷn â edrych ar ôl y coed, trwsio nhw, y twlu nhw, beth bynnag ydych chi eisiau gwneud i gadw'r coetir i fyny. Ond os yna amod yn dweud, mae dyna ydy'r rheswm bod onne. Dwi'n yn gweld hynny yma gwbl. Mae'r gwaith yna mae'r defnydd i fod. A hefyd, os weles i'n iawn mewn papur dyddiol rhyw chydig o fisoedd yn ôl, bod gyda ni fel bobl sy'n byw yn lleol i goetir, yr hawl i fynd yno i hel coed tân. A da ni wedi clywed, yn aml iawn maen nhw'n rhoi bod o'n breifat. A mae oedd hwn i fyny hefo y Forestry Commission. Neu beth yna gyda henw'r bobl wan. Bod gyda chi, o dan yr hen ddeddf mynd yn ôl ganrifodd, a gyda ni hawl i hel coed tân mewn coed. Mewn coedwyd. Diolch yn fawr.
Mr Mead, would you like to answer the 3 speakers, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I absolutely take the point that Councillor Holland has raised there and Councillor Mervyn Parry in relation to the risks associated with this, and as I say, I go back to the original point I made, we're dealing with the legislation that we've got to deal with, unfortunately, and that's how it is. I think the issues that were raised by Councillor Holland there in terms of how we could potentially go about refusing this application, the issue of visual impact and the issue of we think he's going beyond the actual forestry use in this instance. They're material planning considerations, and we can certainly look at those. I think to answer Councillor Mary Lloyd Davis's point there is only one structure. It's a wooden tool store. And they did, with this particular application, however, and this is how officers have had to assess it on the basis of the information that we've had supplied, they have submitted a woodland management plan. And obviously the woodland management plan has been before our Coed Cymru officer, Mike Hughes, who works for Ddinbych County Council, and he is very supportive of that woodland management plan. He feels as though it's a genuine woodland management plan that this person's put in, and therefore that adds a bit of credence, obviously, in relation to the need for the store. I think the issue that we've got to look at beyond this, if we do start getting a number of these types of structures here, and the cumulative management of the woodland, as Councillor Holland had pointed out there, should we be asking questions when the whole of the 85 hectares didn't really need a tool store before, and yet there's a lot of them cropping up. So maybe in the future, if we are getting these applications, the cumulative impact is another issue that could be brought into the equation in terms of the potential impact. But I think, going back to the substantive points today, if members have concerns about this and we're looking to refuse, I think we'd have to stick to material plan considerations, which would potentially be the visual impact of that structure, and whether it is actually genuinely needed for forestry, and we need the evidence that it's going beyond the forestry use. On the first one, the visual impact, I don't think the photos particularly do it justice from the other side in terms of the view from the different angle. So it is AOMB, and that is obviously a genuine issue that you could raise there. I think that was about it, Chair, in terms of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got two more speakers. Councillor Davison.
I've already had my question answered.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would totally concur with Councillor Holland and Councillor Parry's comments with regards to this. Well, my question is, we're saying 85 hectares hasn't required one in the past, and yet potentially we could have multiple ones cropping up on these small plots. I don't know whether this is one of the 2, 5, 7 acre plots or whatever it is. Do we have, or can we impose some sort of space standard or size standard on something that actually does meet the storage question? And have they provided us with a list of equipment that they're proposing to store in a building of that size? Because I wouldn't have thought that they would have needed something that size for a 2 to 3 acre area of wood. So those would be my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more speakers? It appears not, Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a planning application where they've submitted as details of the building that's being proposed. So if that building was to be enlarged or it was to change, then it's a different application. So we're dealing with the measurements of the structure that they've proposed here in this application. If we grant this, then it has to stay as that. The issue in terms of whether we have any controls around sizes of these and whether we can specify them, it goes back to the original point I made around the permitted development for this particular type of structure. In this instance, there was an actual planning application that's being submitted here because we previously refused their prior approval application. So it's a two-stage process. If someone genuinely wants to have a structure in their forest to undertake forestry activity, they don't need planning permission to put any size of structure within their forest. The legislation gives them the right to put that structure in the forest. That's known as permitted development. But what they have to do before they erect, which is the difference here. They already erected it, so we've actually asked them for a planning application. If they come to us before they erect the structure, they can give us the details of what they want to put there under permitted development. And we've got to assess then whether what information they've given us is acceptable, i.e. they can go and put that structure there, or whether we consider they need a formal planning application for it. So in answer to your point there, the permitted development, the law is particularly vague. They're basically very, very vague in relation to describing what a forestry activity is, i.e. you've got to keep these types of tools in there. It's also very vague in relation to the size of the structure. There's no restriction. I've read appeal cases from around the country which show structures much larger than this in forests, toilets within them, multiple toilets to deal with admittedly much larger area of the forest, but actual people working in there, 3 or 4 people, and actually having sort of refreshment facilities in these structures, and inspectors have turned around and said that's perfectly reasonable for somebody who's actually looking after a forest of this size to have that type of structure. It's a confusing area, member, in relation to that, and so in this instance they've applied for a structure that is a specific size. We're assessing that, and that would be the control that we have.
Could I just come back, Chair, very briefly on that? Thank you. I accept, obviously, we have to work within the legislation that we're working with, but I think actually reinforces the point that in this case the legislation is clearly in need of updating and being clarified. It's perhaps one of these circumstances when legislation was brought in and they assumed that it was going to be as with most legislation, it assumes that most people are going to abide by it and not try and abuse it. And now that we're getting to stages where abuses are coming up and the law is not actually causation of that, I think this does reinforce the fact that we should be actually perhaps lobbying at this point for whichever department it is to actually reconsider the legislation, because it's patently ridiculous that for a 2-acre or 3-acre site that they could potentially build Buckingham Palace in there and still meet the test.
Well, is the officer's recommendation is to grant? Is anybody moving anything? Councillor Mervyn Parry.
Offering it to be forwarded.
Sorry?
Offering it for to be refused.
It's been proposed by Councillor Mervyn Parry, Councillor Debbie Owens. On what grounds, Councillor Mervyn Parry?
On visual impact and in the AOMB, I don't know if that's strong enough, and if Martin wants to strengthen whatever conditions on that.
So I'm not for purpose. I think that's I would suggest that we put in it exceeds the requirement for meeting the agricultural test.
So it's been moved by Councillor Mervyn Parry and seconded by Councillor Debbie Owens that we refuse this application. Go to the vote, Mr. Mead, please.
Yeah, OK, Chair. They're perfectly valid reasons for refusal. So when we do go to the vote, it will be plus to grant in accordance with officer recommendation, but minus to refuse on the basis of the reasons that have been put forward. If we clear the board, please, and all vote now.
In favour of the application 1, abstentions 2, against the applications 20, total votes 23. Therefore that recommendation has been refused. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Item number 10. Llanarmon on the Isle / Llandegla, Ward Member Councillor Martin Holland. Application number 21/2014/0096/BF. The proposals for the retention of existing shed and the erection of wood store, partly in retrospect, and the location is at the Clwydd Forest, Big Covert, Maeshaven, Mould. The applicant is Mr. Robert Payne, and the officer's recommendation is to grant. Mr. Morgan's speaking again on this application, please. Again, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Hoggins, please.
Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. My objections on this application are identical to the first application, but I will reiterate the third objection, which I didn't have time to finish last time. Should planning consent be given and the development remain, you will set the precedent and effectively give the green light to further developments in Big Covert and other woodland areas in Denbighshire. The proliferation has already begun in that other similar developments are taking place in the woodland. Owners have planted hedges that are totally out of place in this natural environment. They have removed trees for no other reason than to gain a view over the valley, installed toilets, and built what seems like a children's play pool. More importantly, there is no waste collection service available in the woodland, and one particular owner has left general rubbish at the side of the cabin they've erected, which could be considered as a health hazard. My objections are therefore because the new owners have shown no respect for planning law, countryside policy, existing covenants on the land, or the local community. If this application is granted, what are the implications for the woodland management strategy if individuals are allowed to develop plots however they wish? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Councillor Martin Holland. Oh, sorry, wait a minute. Sorry, do you want to lead in? Oh, no. Councillor Martin Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, again, as Mr. Munger said, we really have covered this, but I would again bring you to this particular application. The area, the trees have been felled around it to allow light in. This particular application has solar panel on the roof. And when I visited this site with the enforcement officers, there was domestic paraphernalia around this shed. There were ceramic flower pots and hardly an indication of this being used for forestry purposes. Sadly, I didn't get a look inside because this building has actually got curtains on it, so I didn't get a look inside. But the picture on the right implies that there are things in there, but doesn't really make it very clear. Again, on the occasion that I visited this particular site, I think Mr. Morgan referred to one of the venues where there were tins and rubbish outside the shed. This is the particular one where I found evidence that somebody had been staying there and had actually left rubbish outside the shed itself. In this particular case, this gentleman has also tried to fence in his area. He's actually started to create hedges by breaking down other trees, etc., and laying them. There is another site not far from here that is worse than this in relation to fences, hedges, and keep out signs. That particular site is not here at the moment because they have not submitted an application. My understanding is they have actually put the site back on the market because they probably see that they can't win their particular case. But we have challenged the marketing details for this other site because it talks about a camping area, toilets and washing facilities. There is no planning for that, and therefore they're actually advertising something that isn't right. So here again, Mr. Chairman, I am asking the Council, as with the previous one, is to refuse this application.
Any speakers?
On the same grounds.
On the same ground. Any speakers? Cyngor Dewi Owens.
It's not a planning point, but would we be due in this situation where these people have cut trees down, that they need a licence to cut trees down? Would they have been allowed to cut them? And if not, have they had? If they had a licence, fine. But if they haven't, if they haven't done, are we obliged as an authority to let National Resources of Wales know what is happening?
Are there any more speakers? There are not. I'll ask Mr. Mead to answer Mr. Councillor Dewi Owens and Martin Holland, and then I'll ask someone to propose something.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not going to fight this one too much, I don't think, really. But obviously in relation to the role of Natural Resources Wales, and also the National Trust are also involved here, because the National Trust control a lot of the forests within Denbighshire, and there are potentially some covenants that prevent certain things happening, like structures. So we are liaising with the National Trust over this issue, and we also obviously liaise with Natural Resources Wales through our Coed Cymru officer in relation to some of the forestry work. So we are on top of that. We are aware of that. I think obviously that it's going to make interesting potential appeals here, and that's not in any way, shape or form seen as a threat, but it is in relation to, you know, if somebody does have genuine forestry work to do and they are allowed to have a structure, then the question is what type of structure are they allowed to have and how far does it go? I think based on what Councillor Holland's pointed out, there's going to be a bit of a fact and degree issue around, do you need plant pots outside, do you need to make it look attractive, etc. So there'll be interesting arguments, I think, if it did ever get to an appeal situation. But I think visual impact and the need, is it fit for purpose, are the two same reasons again. I think we're quite happy to go to the vote, Chair, on that now.
Thank you. Is there anyone moving? Councillor Dewi Owens. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bill Cowie. Did you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear as well.
I just wanted to say two other quick things. I didn't raise the National Trust Covenant because I'm aware that that's not a planning issue, but there is a National Trust Covenant, and I have met with officers of the National Trust to talk about this particular issue. Just one thing that you did mention, Paul, you mentioned that, you know, there had been an appeal elsewhere, and that they had particularly won that case. I think, looking at the information you gave me, it related to a development of 22 hectares, which was considerable difference in size to what we're looking at here.
Right. It's been proposed by Councillor Dewi Owens and seconded by Councillor Bill Cowie that we refuse this application. Are there the same reasons as the last? Yeah. The same. Go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. When we clear the board, it will be plus to grant and minus to refuse. If we clear the board, please, and all vote now. Thank you.
In favour of the application, 2. Abstentions, 2. Against the application, 19. Total votes, 23. That application has been refused. We go back now to item number 7. Ward Llandernog. Councillor Mervyn Parry. Application number 18/2014/0793/PF. And the proposal is for the change of use of outbuildings to form 2 self-contained suites of hotel letting accommodation, the demolition of steel silo, steel-framed agricultural building and a stone wall, installation of a package treatment plant and associated works. The location is at Pentre Mawr Country House Hotel, Llandernog, and the applicant is Mrs. Bray Carrington Sykes. Officer's recommendation is to grant. Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
Thank you, Chair. I did declare a personal interest on this one. All I would say is that I'm happy to go with the application as it's there with the officers.
Thank you. There are a bit of information on the blue sheet. I'll give you half a minute or so to read it. All right. Councillor Mervyn Parry has proposed to go with the officer's recommendation. Is someone seconding it, please? Any speakers? Cynghorydd Mary Lloyd Davies.
Llynia.
On the way, Chair.
So rwy'n eisiau siarad? Nag oes? Cynghorydd Mary Davies.
gofyn am y cwt, yn y glas, mae'n sôn am dynnu shed wartheg i lawr. Lle mae honno yn y lluniau? A pa reswm sydd eisiau tynnu lawr, ta be?
Any other speakers? Mr. Mead or Mr. Weaver, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's a portal-framed building. You actually can't see it. Well, actually, sorry, it's actually behind the building. You can see there. It's probably easier for me to refer you to it on the plan within the documents. I'll tell you the page, Chair. It's the plan on page 69. I think it's probably the best one. In order for the single-storey building there is one of the two proposed for conversion to the holiday units. Immediately behind that is this big portal building, and the intention is to create a small amenity area at the back of that, a holiday accommodation unit. That's the reason the building would need to be taken down. You simply couldn't have an accommodation unit with an agricultural building within about 5 metres of it at the back. It's quite a substantial building, the one at the back, so that's the reason why it's proposed for removal as part of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Any more speakers? No. It's been proposed by Councillor Mervyn Parry, seconded by Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill, that is to recommend the officer's to go with the officer's recommendation. Can you please, Mr. Mead?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. It will be plus to grant in accordance with the officer recommendation and minus to refuse. If we clear the board, please. And all vote now. Thank you.
In favour of the recommendation, 21. Abstentions, 2. Against, nil. Total votes, 22. Therefore, that application has been granted. Item number 8, again Ward Member Councillor Mervyn Parry, Llandrnog, application 18/2014/0794/LB, and the proposal for the change of use of outbuildings to form 2 self-contained suites of hotel letting accommodation, demolition of steel silo, steel-framed agricultural building and stone wall, installation of a package treatment plant and associated works, a listed building application. At the location is Pentramal Country House Hotel, Llandrnog. The applicant is Mrs. Bray Carrington Sykes, and the officer's recommendations to grant. It's been moved by Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts, seconded. Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill. Any speakers? No. Please go to the vote, Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Chair. Plus to grant in accordance with the officer recommendation, minus to refuse. If we clear the board, and all vote now, please.
In favour of the application, 21. Abstentions, 1. Against the application, nil. Total votes, 22. That application has been granted. Agenda item number 11 is for reconsideration of a planning application for Craig Ddwyraut Quarry Rhewl, Rhuthun. The application number is 24/2014/1246 PS, and there is a recommendation attached to this one in acknowledging members' resolution on the application and in regard to the contents of this report and the officer's report to the January committee. It is recommended that the planning committee adopt the original recommendation of the planning officer and grant the variation of this condition. Before I go to Paul, there is information on the blue sheet for you to read. Mead, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report that we put before members, starting on page 153 of the main agenda, it obviously sets out why we consider this application needs further reconsideration. Members will recall that we debated this particular item at our planning committee in January, and there ended up being 2 votes on this particular application. The first vote was a proposition to grant planning permission with a variation to the recommendation to add a condition obliging the presence of a supervisor on site. That vote was 15 in favour and 5 against. We then went to a second vote on a proposition to actually refuse planning permission, and Councillor Mervyn Parry suggested as a basis for a refusal concern about the control of the users of the site, potential for increase in crime locally and nationally from those people that were using the training centre. That vote went 12 to refuse and 8 to grant, and therefore members resolved to refuse that planning permission. As members are aware, where we get decisions that officers feel might potentially give rise to the risks of costs being awarded against the council on an appeal, and members will recall that there has been an appeal at this site previously that an inspector allowed and did actually award costs against Ddinbych County Council on. We thought it within our jurisdiction, respectfully, to bring this item back. The reasons that we wanted to bring it back was that the issue around the fear of crime and how users of this particular facility will be controlled, we felt, well, if there isn't an organisation better at doing that than North Wales Police, then we're not sure who it would be. So that was the risk on our part. We would have thought, if we're sat in an appeal with that reason for refusal, an inspector might say, you shouldn't really be concerning yourself about how this site is going to be controlled in terms of risk of crime, because North Wales Police have adequately set out what the site management arrangements are. That's why we've brought the report back for you, members. The recommendation on the original scheme was within the report at page 164, and it obviously sets out what the relevant conditions are in relation to that. I'm happy to answer any further questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. As you know, this site has been before us before and been before planning previously to me being here, and during that time it was refused on various conditions, and it went to appeal, and it was granted on appeal, but the condition clause 3 was left on it that it was only to be used by North Wales Police. And the residents of Howell are more than happy to put up with this site. It is a very noisy site when it's been used. It's used and can be used 5 hours every day for firing and explosive use, 5 hours every day during the week, not weekends, with a few conditions for altering the hours during the week. Residents are happy to go with that, happy for North Wales Police to be using it. I'll just read what I've put here. As I stated when the application came before this committee last month for a decision which was refused on the grounds of local concerns of the usage of this site by private gun clubs, the concerns are that there is no adequate proof that rigorous checks will be made as to who will be allowed to use this site and who will be supervising them. It's not shown that it's North Wales Police that will be supervising these gun clubs when they're on the site. That's not clear. There is a site warden, but no proof has been shown that the warden is sufficiently trained to monitor and control this site and the groups using it. The police will of course be trained, but not the warden, who would be the one there when the external gun clubs are there. He'll be the one that's opening and closing the gates, keeping an eye that they're parking in the right place and closing the gates when they go out. Maybe he'll be in charge of the book that they're filling in that they've got to do, but he's not adequately trained for doing that. I therefore ask you to fuse the change of this condition on the this application as we did last month on the grounds of the concerns of the locals regarding the safe use of this site by external clubs, and there is not adequate checks in place on this one. Just a quick note on when it went to appeal last time, on the paper that came back from appeal on item 7 on it, The evidence that was given to them, the extended facility would not be open to all and sundry as implied by the Council, but would be strictly controlled by North Wales Police Authority in view of the safety and security implications. No access to firearms and weapons would be afforded to training groups. And that's what was put on it when it came back from there. So I'd ask you to put it forward again for refusal. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Hugh Williams. Proposed by Councillor Mervyn Parry and seconded by Councillor Hugh Williams that we refuse this application again. Any more speakers? Cynghorydd Mary Lloyd Davies.
Wel, os da chi'n cofio, dda'r unig gwelliant wedi fynd drwad o blaen, a swyddogion ddim yn ei gynnwys o yn be maen nhw'n gynnig heddiw, os dwi'n iawn. Chwbl mae'n dweud y fama ydi adopt the original recommendation. Felly, welai, dwi hefo Merwyn y fama ynglyn â beth sy'n cael ei ddeud yn yr apel y manne. Ond petai gynna ni oruchwyliwr wedi ei hyfforddi'n addas i fod ar y safle bob amser, ond ni fel bod hynny'n ateb. A dwi'n cynnig hwnnw fel gwelliant i'r amod gan y swyddogion.
Just come in, if I may, Chair. Just obviously the report that we brought back to members on page 154. I just.
12 o'clock.
The webcast, everybody. I'll just answer Mary's question, if that's all right, just in relation to the point that...
Gan ddeud, Mr Cadeirydd, fi'n synnu bod chi ddim wedi rhoi fyny siarad saddwn ni allan. Oherwydd, be mae'n ddeud yn y reolau, os ydy'r gloch yn canu o hyd, mae'n y dan. Dyna mae'n dweud.
Yr rheswm traddwch chi allan rwan sydd da ni wedi gael bod yna ddyn newydd yna yn troi...
Ia, oes o'n neud yn siŵr bod o'n gwybod be oedd o'n neud, cyn dechrau. Dio ddim digon da, ac os gai ofyn Mr Cadeirydd bod ni'n rhoi cwyn drwad i prif weithredwr bod eisiau fo wybod be mae'n neud cyn i dan o fo.
Iawn.
Chos beth sy'n mynd i ddigwydd, daw bobl eistedd fan newan le os ddim tân heddiw, mae'r gloch yn canu, diolch yn gwybod be mae'n neud. Haid ni rhoi rheol i lawr.
Iawn. Cadeirydd Tân wedi siarad. Mr Mead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to point members in the direction of page 154 of the report again, if I may, just to try and bring the matter to a close. Obviously, in relation to the reason why we haven't included an additional condition that Councillor Mary Lloyd Davies had suggested last time around better site supervision. The information that we've got from North Wales Police. The use of the site would be accredited gun clubs and other government organisations. In terms of site management, the application states any organisation using the facility would have to be a large-scale body and have accredited standards such as the British Association for Shooting and Conservation, would have to have licensed instructors in place. The organisation would have to have risk assessments in place for their activities and hold suitable public liability insurance. Chief officers of North Wales Police would need to sign off an authority for the organisations to use the range, and all activities would be monitored by the range warden, who would also be responsible for opening and closing the site and ensuring that shooting only took place within the permitted hours, and a register would be kept, and in the event of any unsafe activities, then the organisation would be deauthorised from using the range. It fundamentally comes down to, does it not, a question as to whether we trust in North Wales Police to manage their land and manage the people coming on their land. I mean, I've been on that site a number of times now, and I had to go through a lot of stringent checks when I went on there. It's whether we can deem them capable of controlling their own site for this particular use, and that's why we don't think any additional conditions are going to be necessary. Thank you.
Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry, sydd o'n nôl.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. I think maybe sometimes quite a few of us might question North Wales Police on several decisions they make. But this now is going from a North Wales Police. What they want to try and do is take it from a North Wales Police activity to a commercial activity, because they want to make money out of it to justify what they're doing there, which I can understand that as well. But the control of this site still comes down to the range warden. If I wanted to go there with my gun club, it would be the range warden that will be checking what guns I've got, what ammunition I've got that's going in there, not one of North Wales Police. North Wales Police might sign my gun club in, but it's the warden who would inevitably be responsible for that, and I don't think that there's enough. We haven't got enforcement officers in Denbighshire to enforce what we need to enforce now. Never mind to enforce something we have no idea what they're trying to enforce. So again, sir, Chair, I'd like to put this up for review.
Is there a seconder? Cynghorydd Hugh Williams. Cynghorydd Mary Gloy Davies.
Wybodaeth gan y swyddog 3.3 ar tudalen 154. Wrach, faswn ni'n medru deud wrach, faswn ni'n tynnu nôl yng nghynnu cynta a gwella hwnnw trwy roi 3.3 yn yr amodau. A bod chi'n newid yr enw range warden i oruchwyliwr sydd wedi hyfforddi yn addas, fel mae Merwyn wedi deud, achos, chymod, yn yr caniatad yr archwilydd ar ei wneud, mae'n glir yn dydi fanne, y rheswm wedi roi o. Os da ni'n mynd heibio hwnnw, dwi'n ame bod ni'n agor y drws, a dwi'n yn hun, os ni'n rhoi caniatad, ond bod ni'n cryfhau gosod 3.3 mewn yn yr amodau, a newid y range warden yma i berson sy'n mwy addas i'r gwaith.
Ti'n cytuno fo hwnna, Merwyn?
Wel, sag ydy un o'r North Wales Police Fire bod yn mynd i fod yna, nach dwi, dwi'n meddwl said o fod yn nhw, dyn nhw'n mynd i oed fo yna a warden yna, mae'n y warden ar y site yn barod, so fysa'r boi yma'n colli waith, felly, wrth wneud hynny. So dwi ddim yn siŵr os dwi'n hapus yna, dwi am sticio i'n proposal cyntaf am refusal, dych fawr.
Any more Cynghorydd Alice Jones?
Would giving permission for a term rather than indefinitely be acceptable, and then after a term of activity, then to be able to monitor and see if it had been working as we want it to work?
Any more speakers? No. Mr. Mead, please.
Sorry, Mr. Cadeirydd, os na eilydd i'n nghais i?
Sorry, na ddrwg gynna i. Os na eilydd i cael... Fes eich dweud eto, os gwrwch yn dda, Cynghorydd?
Dwi wedi ddod allan wwan efo, dwi wedi newid, ond fel da chi'n gwybod, ydy'r bod ni'n gosod 3.3 mewn, a gosod bod rhaid ni fod goruchwyliwr wedi'w gymeradwyo yn lle'r range warden, pen mae'r bobl diarth ma ne. Bydd o fod yna pen mae'r heddlu yno, ond pen mae'r bobl diarth yno, bod rhaid ni gael rhywun arall.
Could I just say that if you could answer my question, I would feel more comfortable then to deal with what Councillor Mary Davies has said.
Okay. Paul?
Because taking something off is far more difficult than giving to them. And it would be better to give it for a short time to begin with, perhaps 2 or 3 years, and then consider it again at that time, or let them apply again at that time and give us a report on how it's gone.
Mr. Mead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll answer Councillor Alice Jones's point first. It's quite a complicated planning consent that was given at this particular site on appeal back in 2008, and there's a number of sort of stringent controls that are in place around the operation of the site over the course of a year. The issue around, you know, only 12 such activities shall take place within any 12-month period for this type of activity. So there's quite a lot of almost sort of temporary controls that are in place anyway. What we've also got to be very careful of with these types of proposals, we've got to deal with what is before us. What are they applying for? They're applying for a change to the condition to allow other organisations to use the site. There are other controls beyond that in relation to how often those people can use the site. The issue in relation to Councillor Mary Lloyd-Davies's point as well, going back to page 154, the application contained this information around site management arrangements. That is within the application. So if we're granting planning consent, we will be granting planning consent in accordance with those arrangements. So we don't necessarily need to belt and braces it with an additional condition, because that's what they've actually supplied by way of the information. So again, I don't think it's necessary. The issue, I think, boiling down to it now, listening to Councillor Mervyn Parry, Councillor Alice Jones and Councillor Mary Lloyd-Davies, is this issue around what does this range warden do? What is his role on the site? Now, if we feel as though, as a committee, that we want to sit in an appeal with an inspector and challenge what North Wales Police are saying to us around site security and the role of the range warden, we'd need to have evidence that we feel as though that range warden can't do an adequate job to control the people that are coming to use that site. If there was no mention of a range warden, or no mention of any supervision, or no mention of the police carrying out those checks, I can fully appreciate that. I think we've got an issue, but I think we're boiling down to the issue of they've said, these are our site management arrangements, we've got a range warden, why do we, as a planning committee, feel as though that's not adequate? If we want to add an additional condition, that's at your discretion to do so. But from an officer perspective, we feel as though it's contained within the information that they've supplied. Thank you, Chair.
Dach chi'n derbyn yr ysboniad, Cynghorydd Meirig? Da ni gadael o hwnna. Right. The original proposal now is by Councillor Mervyn Parry and seconded by Councillor Hugh Williams, that we reject the officer's recommendation. Right. It's been proposed by Councillor Alice Jones that we grant it, seconded to Councillor Hughes.
It's a straight for and against.
Straight for and against.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We, I think, are ready to go to the vote now. It's going to be a straight for and against. It will be plus to grant in accordance with officer recommendation and minus to refuse. If we clear the board, please. And all vote now. Thank you.
In favour of the application, 14. Abstentions, nil. Against the application, 7. Total of votes, 21. That application has been granted. We go to the last item now, which is item number 12. And it's the... I need 14. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, we've got plenty. Yeah. Oh, we haven't got plenty, no. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're there, yes. Item... Dach chi'n mynd, Hugh? Councillor Bill Tasker, are you going? Yes. Councillor Bill Tasker, are you leaving? Are you leaving? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Item number 12, special reports. Neuadd development brief. To seek members' approval to undertake consultation on the draft site development brief and the accompanying strategic environmental assessment with statutory bodies and members to the public. Can I welcome Angela Loftus, who's with us? Councillor Davis-Smith was, but unfortunately Councillor Davis-Smith is not well. So over to you, Angela, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'll make this quite quick. Sure you'll be relieved to hear. Basically, this is a draft development brief, so it's another development brief in one of the series that we're producing, and we're looking for approval to go out to public consultation. The development brief itself is attached as Appendix 1 to the reports. The actual document that we're talking about is Appendix 1. I'm sure members are familiar with the site. It's in the centre of Prestatyn. It's off Nant Hall Road, and it's the site of the council offices plus the 2 car parks that sit alongside, and the library which fronts Nant Hall Road. There are plans within the development brief showing the extent of the site. It's pages 184 and 185 which show the full extent of the site. Basically, the development brief sets out the framework for guiding potential redevelopment of the site, and it sets out a vision, and we're trying to achieve something better than we've got at the moment. It does allow for either the demolition or the retention of the existing building, but what we're looking for is something that's well designed, because the site's partly in the conservation area, so we're looking for good quality design. Something that's attractive and vibrant, and that links really well to the town centre, so good pedestrian links, good links in. An active frontage along Nant Hall Road, so that there's more activity on that road, so potentially cafes and restaurants, potentially with a residential development above them. Be looking for a mixture of uses. The development brief is very flexible. It could include retail, could include leisure, business uses. We're looking at potentially residential on the southern part of the site, which is where it's surrounded by existing residential uses. The brief aims to retain the frontage to Nant Hall Road, because there are some interesting buildings there. They're not actually listed, but it's an interesting frontage. And it also aims to retain the existing council chamber, if at all possible. We're also looking for a good quality public open space or square as part of this scheme to provide a focus for the town, because I think that's been reflected in our discussions with local members. So just in terms of the consultation, we've been to the LDP steering group. We've already met the member area group a couple of times, and the comments that we've had back from the member area group have been fed into the development brief and are reflected in the development brief. We'll be looking at an 8-week public consultation period, so the usual amount of time, and we'll be looking to start early March. And it will be writing out to all town and community councils, contacts on our database, information on the website, and we'll also be having drop-in events at Prestatyn Library, which that was following discussion with the member area group, was something that we wanted to take forward. As usual, the comments that we receive will be reported back to the LDP steering group and would come back here to planning committee, along with any changes that are proposed to reflect those comments, and it would be planning committee that would finally approve the document. So that's it. I've rattled through that really quick. If anybody's got any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be equally as brief. I am supportive of the development brief. As Angela said, it has taken on board, has been tweaked since it came to the member area group to take on board the comments, particularly in relation to the Prestatyn Town Council established user rights over the chamber and adjoining room in the 6 to 8 Nant Hall Road area. And I think we can't necessarily be too prescriptive, because it's a question we want to test the market and see exactly what they want to come back with. But I think that this does represent a very good document, and I'm more than happy to propose officers' recommendations to go out to consultation.
Thank you very much. Any more speakers? Councillor Paul Penlington.
I'd like to say I'm of course fully in favour of public consultation, but I'm slightly sceptical of Ddinbych County Council's public consultations in the past. You've done an extensive consultation exercise of various things, most recently the Gweddarllediad development. At the end of the day, the public response didn't count for anything. How can you assure us that the public's response to this will be taken into account and not just become a tokenistic exercise that's dismissed?
Before I go to Angela, Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill's proposed recommendation. Anyone seconding it, please? Councillor Paul Penlington. Any more speakers? Cynghorydd Mary Lloyd Davies.
Dim ond sydyn iawn. Dwi'n cymryd mai dim ond cynllun di hwn i ddeud be ddefnydd o'r tir. Diolch yn dangos pwy bia, achos mae'n ddarnau fama, ond i'n meddwl bod perthyn i'r Eglwys yng Nghymru. Felly, jyst, chymod, i'r syniad beth yn hoffi weld, cymryd bod yr Eglwys mynd i dynnu lawr yn neuadd gyda nhw ac yn y blaen.
Any more speakers? If not, Angela, please.
Right, thank you. Just to answer the last question first, if that's okay. The ownership is split between the County Council and the Church in Wales. You're quite correct. The top car park and the community hall belong to the Church in Wales, and we've been discussing ways forward with the Church in Wales, so they're fully aware of this. They've seen copies of various copies of the draft development brief through the process, so they are aware of what's going on. In terms of the public consultation, we obviously try and involve as many people as we can, and usually drop-in events are very successful in getting local people involved in these things. And any comments we receive would be reported back to yourselves at Planning Committee, so you'd be able to see each comment in full if you wish. They'd be summarised and part of that report back. What we do also do when we have drop-in events, people don't necessarily have to write out forms, complete forms. We take a note of the discussions we have at those events as well, and that will be part of our report back. So it would all be reported back and reflected there. And at the end of the day, if members decide they want to make further changes to the brief to reflect those comments, then that's a decision for yourselves at Planning Committee.
Thank you, Angela. Well, it's been proposed by Councillor Julian Thompson-Hill and seconded by Councillor Paul Pennington that we accept the recommendations. Mr Mead, please. Can we go to the vote? Oh, sorry.
Okay, it will be plus to authorise us to go into consultation on the draft site development brief, minus not to. If we clear the board, please. And all vote now. Thank you.
In favour of the recommendation 18, abstentions nil, against nil, total votes 18. That recommendation has been accepted. Before we close, can I thank the officers for this morning's work and the support staff, and thank you all very much indeed. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Good.
Quiet to them.